Hey everyone, I'm Mike Settele, the founder of Settele Tutoring, and we are reaching the end of 2024, the first full year of worldwide digital SATs. So what do you think? Was it a good year? Personally, I think I handled the transition pretty well. I like the new test, but we are going to see some changes to it in 2025. So I'll talk about some specific changes that have already been announced by the College Board, and I'll make some more speculative predictions about other things that I think are going to change for the SAT in 2025. So specifically, we'll talk about the new practice tests that have been announced, the new test date that's been announced, and we'll talk about some new lessons that I'm going to be making to help you deal with the SAT changes, as well as the things that we know are already going to stay the same between the tests. So let's dive right into the lessons. First things first on my agenda is I want to finish all my lessons on the grammar rules. There are still a few stragglers that are out there, so I'm going to be making those. I'm also going to be making some passage-based lessons about things like the graph and chart questions. That's a very high priority for me. I know a lot of people have requested that. And I'd also like to make a video somehow giving you guidance about what specifically to do as you prepare for the March SAT. However, I'd love your feedback about how I can make this series without having to remake it every time there's an SAT, because there's too many SATs and I can't make videos all the time without sacrificing something else. So I'd much rather have something that works consistently no matter what the SAT test date that you are taking is. So please comment with any feedback or suggestions there, but also comment with any other lesson requests or strategy requests that you think I should be making, especially if you've been watching my channel for a while. Where are the gaps? What am I missing? I'm happy to listen to people who I've been studying and know what they want and what they need, and then I can divert my time and resources to making those things. Now let's get into the first main announcement from the College Board. We have a new test date. In the past, there have been SATs in March, May, June, August, October, November, and December. Those are going to stick around, but we're also now getting a new SAT on September 13th, 2025. And I presume that every year from now on, we will also get a September SAT. So I don't think I have confirmation of that, but hopefully it's another good thing because, yeah, why not? Let's have more opportunities to take the test. My personal feeling about this is it's probably not going to change many people's study schedule too much. I think the main reason they're adding the September date is because there's such high demand for the August SAT, and they basically need a way to catch people who don't sign up in time for August and can't get a spot. So that's my guess, that mostly the people who take September are really the people who were supposed to take August but didn't register in time. Now, I still think the August SAT is going to be better because at least here in the United States, that date is going to fall basically right when school starts. So maybe hopefully right before it, or like in that first week where you haven't really gotten too many assignments yet. So it's a great opportunity to take the test after a summer of studying without having to deal with school. The September test will be a little deeper into the school year, so you'll probably start to have a busy life, and that might take away from those last few weeks of studying for the SAT. So you don't really want to do that September 1 unless you can't get an August registration. The best way to make sure you have a registration for the August test is in May, starting May 1st. Every single morning, every single day, log on to the SAT website and check to see when they make it available that you can register for the August SAT. Okay, so they usually do it sometime in May, but I don't know the dates. You're just going to need to check consistently, and as soon as you see that that button is ready to go, just click it and register and get your spot. That's what I tell my students to do because it's a really, really important test date, and that September 1 is going to be rough. I already know it. So if you have other thoughts about that, put them in the comments. The other thing I'm curious about, and this is more of a prediction than actually something I have evidence of, is I think that we're going to see more schools offer in-school SATs during the fall. Right now, it's very common for schools to offer SATs in the United States during March and April, in addition to the March SAT that's already on a weekend. And a lot of school districts do this. They pay for their students to take it. It's free. And it's a great opportunity to get your first SAT in before finals and APs and things like that in the spring. So I really like that opportunity. And I had a couple of students who were given that opportunity in the fall, again, because I think that it's so hard to find spaces for students, people who want to take it in the fall and need it for their application. So I hope more schools do that. If you have experience with that, if you took an in-school SAT in the fall, not the PSAT, an SAT, let me know. Put it in the comments. I'm curious what that experience was like. Now on to the big news. The practice tests. We are getting new practice tests in February of 2025. This is from the College Board. I will put a link to this announcement in the description. That way you can see it, but this is basically it. So here's the highlights. Tests 1 through 3, which are currently in the Blue Book app, are gone. They're going to be removed. Okay, so they will be dead. And good riddance. I do not like those tests. I'll talk more about why, but basically they were not realistic for the actual exam. So people would take them, get really good scores, and then take the real SAT and then do terribly because they just weren't practicing with good materials. So these are official materials, by the way, from the College Board, but still. The best news here is that we are going to get a brand new Practice Test 7 that is entirely made up of new SAT questions. That's going to be awesome for everybody. Then we have some kind of mediocre news. Practice Tests 8 through 10 are going to have some new questions, but also some questions from old practice tests, from tests 1 through 3 that they're killing off. So what's the deal then? Are we getting 4 new practice tests? Or are we getting 1 and then 3 kind of, sequels to the first 3? What's the deal here? So I'll talk more about it, but my view is basically that these 8 through 10 for people who have been studying already are not going to be as great of a resource. So let's break it down. Okay, let's talk about what this means depending on where you are in your prep. So whether you're new to the SAT, whether you've taken some of the practice tests in Blue Book, or if you've taken all of the practice tests in Blue Book, I think this announcement is going to affect you differently. So if you're new to the SAT, biggest thing, do not take tests 1 through 3. If you're going to get a head start on your prep for the March SAT, great, but don't do those tests. Do not look at them. Don't worry about them. Don't touch them. Even if you've taken some practice tests, if any of 1 through 3 are left in your Blue Book, don't take them. Don't do them. I know it's tempting to be like, well, if they're going to disappear, I want to use them before they're gone. No, the reason they're disappearing is they're bad practice tests. Do not do them because it will also spoil some other future tests for you, those tests 8 through 10. Now, what should you do? Basically, stick to tests 4 through 6. So if you've never taken any SATs, then that's pretty much all you need to do before your March SAT is tests 4 through 6. That's just 2 or 3 exams, practice test exams, before your real exam. You don't need to be flying through all of the practice tests, okay? Now, if you have taken some and you have any of 4 through 6 left, start with those. Those are good. The reason those are our priority is we know them. We know that they are a realistic sample of what's going to be on the real SAT. I have videos of me taking all of those exams. I have individual videos of every single question on that exam. So there's plenty of resources to deal with 4 through 6. So you're going to have plenty of time to work with those tests before your March SAT. Whereas all these new tests, we might get them at the end of February. We might only have a week and a half to really work with those exams before you take the real thing, and you're not going to get good resources. So the only reason to start touching on those is if you've already taken most of 4 through 6 and you need an extra practice test, I would recommend taking number 7 because it's going to be new and probably you've already taken some of 1, 2, and 3, and that's going to mess up how 8 through 10 work for you. Now, if you've taken all the practice tests, well, then, yeah, number 7 is pretty much all you got. And you got to take it seriously and you got to take it under the best possible conditions. Save it for the week before your exam and just make sure you are taking it in the best frame of mind and pretending it is basically a real exam. It's a dress rehearsal. Now, the reason for that is I don't think that 8 through 10 are going to be that useful for you. You will have seen those questions because you already took tests 1 through 3. So some of the hardest questions, some of the ones that would normally slow you down the most, you might have an advantage because you've already seen how to solve them. So you will probably get a higher score on tests 8 through 10, making it not necessarily reflective of how you would actually perform on a real SAT. So you've got to be skeptical of those practice scores, but hopefully they're good and we get mostly new questions. But I just don't know. I don't know what they're going to be. My guess is because the College Board is a business and it costs money to write new questions and to release them out in the world. They're probably going to reuse a lot of old questions rather than including new ones. So I would bet that 8 through 10 are mostly going to be copies of 1 through 3. I would also guess that it's not going to be a 1-to-1 copy. It's not like if you took practice test 1, then practice test 8 will be the same stuff you've already seen. But then practice test 2 will correspond to 9 and 3 to 10. I think it's going to be just a giant mix. So there's going to be spoilers everywhere. So that means if you've already taken all the practice tests, you're going to need to find other ways to do targeted practice. It's not going to be the case that you can do a million practice tests. And honestly, I think that's true for everyone. The practice tests are not the practice that you're supposed to be doing for the SAT, right? I think it's a misconception. People think the practice tests are the practice. No, the practice tests are the goal of your practice. You should be doing targeted practice on specific skills, specific strategies, specific question types. and doing it in a way that's not related to the practice tests. And that way, when you feel like you've learned a bunch of things and you're ready, you take a practice test to evaluate how well your other targeted practice has been going. Did you actually learn those things, or are there some things you haven't memorized? Things like that. So the practice tests are important ways to measure your progress, but they are not themselves the most important part of your practice. And that's also true for people who are new to the SAT, have taken some practice tests. Make sure you don't just do practice tests. Save them. You're probably going to take the SAT multiple times. You need to have that ability to evaluate your progress later on. So save test 7 to 10 for retesting later in 2025. And whatever you've got left, set them aside. Don't feel that temptation. There's other things you can do. If you have questions about this, please put them in the comments. I do have lessons already on how to best use the practice test, so I'll put those links in the description as well. Let's talk about some other predictions I have. I have heard rumors that there will be some changes to the Desmos calculator. And this is really scary because I've certainly encouraged my students to use Desmos in very creative ways to solve math questions. So I have no idea what exactly is changing. If I get information, I'll obviously share it. But my predictions is that I wouldn't be surprised if we see changes to the way that Desmos handles regressions, where you plug some points in and get the curve or the line that goes through those points. I wouldn't be surprised if it starts behaving more like regular handheld graphing calculators, like this guy right here, this TI-84, where you can't put in equations unless they're in y equals format. I wouldn't be surprised if they made that kind of change. I wouldn't be surprised if they got rid of the slider or made changes to the way that we can use function notation. But again, these are all speculations. The reason I think that these things might change is basically they're really useful and they prevent us from having to do too much algebra. And the SAT ultimately wants us to know how to do algebra. So they're going to limit our ability to avoid it, is my guess. But I have no actual evidence of this. This is just hunches. So my advice is, in the meantime, yes, learn how Desmos works. Use my lessons to do that. But don't completely neglect algebra. If you need to practice just normal solving equations, do it. When I do videos, I usually do both. I'll show you the Desmos way and I'll show you the long, tedious algebra way. Watch the video to learn the long, tedious algebra way, just in case we need it for these kind of future questions after Desmos changes. The other thing I think is going to happen a lot in 2025 is we're going to just see a lot more spoilers specifically for these practice tests. And so, as I said, practice tests are not the biggest part of your prep, but you don't want them to be spoiled. You want to take a practice test without having ever seen any of those questions before, so that way you get a score that is accurate, that is an accurate representation of how you would actually do on an SAT, where you're going to get questions where in theory you've never really seen them before, right? They might have similar skills and strategies, or they will have similar skills and strategies to everything you practice, but the formatting of the questions, especially those hard, weird, twisted ones, those are going to be unique to each SAT. So if you start spoiling those questions, you're going to have an advantage on the practice tests. And there are, I think, a lot of spoilers out there already. So be careful when you are using the question bank, the College Board's question bank. Make sure you check the box that says exclude active questions or whatever it says. They're probably going to change that too, for all I know. But make sure you do that so you're not including the practice test questions in your searches. That's very important. Also, though, be careful watching YouTube. I've warned about this in my other videos. There are a lot of tutors who get lots of views, tens of thousands of views on their videos, and all they're doing is telling you how to answer the practice test questions without warning you that that's what they're doing. So you are watching this video, you think you're learning some great thing, but in reality what you're doing is you're ruining the practice test. So now when you take the practice test, you have an advantage, you get a score that is too high, and then when you take the real thing, you are surprised at how much harder it is. It's not the test is harder. It's that you had an advantage on the practice test that you're not going to have on the real test. So before you watch a YouTube video, if it throws up just a random question, did the tutor say where that question came from? Does the description or the title say where those questions came from? Mine always will. That's my promise. But not every tutor is as scrupulous. So just be careful of that, especially since it seems like TikTok might be killed off as well in 2025, at least here in the US. So a lot of those people are going to come on to YouTube, and just be careful. Not everyone is interested in actually teaching you useful things. They're just after the clicks. So hopefully you can get some great resources. I know I will always kind of share when I find something that's great, but my channel always will tell you where the questions come from. So make sure you read the title, read the description, all that stuff. And yes, if this is helpful, if you are starting your prep, make sure you like this video, make sure you subscribe, comment, like I said, with any any thoughts and suggestions. I always prioritize comments from people who subscribe, so that's a good incentive to do it. And like I said, I'll be releasing new videos, so make sure that you subscribe and get the notifications so you know when those are available. Once again, I'm Mike Settele. Thank you so much for watching. It's been a great year. This channel has grown amazingly, and I hope for an even better year in 2025. Remember, when it comes to your scores, don't settle for less, Settele for more.